now just because it ticked my curiosity immediately, what is the difference between a dismissive avoidant and a narcissist?
Yeah, so it comes down to empathy.
So what has likely happened to a child that developed an avoidant attachment?
Yeah, so there's actually two.
How do you help people arrive at some sort of awareness there where they can actually change their wiring essentially to develop healthier relationships as adults?
No, I'm catching everything you're putting down.
Oh, Kameran, welcome to my podcast, Becoming Secure with Magsmindset. I'm really happy that you're here because when you sent me your message introducing yourself, you touched upon all of the things that I love talking about. You're a marriage coach. You have a lot of experience with attachment styles. I'm so happy that you want to share your story. So thank you for being here. And I would love it if you get started by just sharing a little bit about yourself and how you got into all of the things that you're currently working with.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited to talk about all of these topics today because they're my passions as well. How I got involved with being a coach, I actually changed my major 11 times in college. And yes, and my advisor hated me. And admissions loved me, but my advisor hated me. She was like, no, you need to think about this a little bit longer before you go down this path. So I ended up actually getting a degree in elementary education. And I was good at teaching. I taught in the kindergarten to second grade classroom for a little over a decade. Loved the kids, did not so much love the parents here in the United States. And again, I was good at it, but always knew that this was not my calling. And so when I really started to dig into what is my purpose career-wise, what is my calling, what do I need to be doing, I actually started going back to high school and looking at the things that really lit me up, the things that I was looking at and Googling when Google was barely even a thing. So it always went to relationships and what made people tick and the fundamental differences between men and women and the differences in relation in different dynamics and cultures and like all the different things. And so, so since then, that passion never waned, even from 18 years old till now I'm 42. None of that has ever gone away. That's always, if I've got 5 minutes, I'm like, what is this? What is that? What causes this? What is the difference between a dismissive avoidant and a narcissist? Different stuff like that. So that's how I got here.
I love all of this. I can relate to all of what you're saying on so many levels. And also now just because it ticked my curiosity immediately, what is the difference between a dismissive avoidant and a narcissist?
Yeah, so it comes down to empathy. A lot of times a dismissive avoidant is someone who sits here and they can empathize with you. It's just very difficult for them. And so a dismissive avoidant is going to actually feel bad. They know that being a dismissive avoidant, being emotionally unavailable, things like that are not right, like that it's not a healthy thing. They can see that it's hurting you, but they don't know how to do anything different because that's what they were taught as such a young age between birth and 3. I mean, that's when our attachment styles are created, is between birth and 3. So they don't know any different. Whereas a narcissist really doesn't care. Like a narcissist is perfectly fine watching you go to bed and they're like, cool, you do you, I'm going to sleep just fine over here on my side. And also know that you're the problem and not me. So it's a motive, and it comes down to motive, but it also comes down to what they're feeling inside. So it's really easy for us to be like, you're a narcissist. And actually, we don't know that they're a narcissist because it comes down to what they're feeling. And a lot of times a dismissive avoidant, they're going to come back to you and say, this hurts me. Like, I don't like seeing this. I just don't know what else to do. So yeah, it comes down to tools.
That is so interesting. I apparently, well, not even apparently, on my podcast, I have tended to derive a little bit more in the direction of anxious attachment simply because it's been my own attachment and the one that I can relate to the most, but also because I think maybe I attracted somehow, but now that we're on this topic, I find it incredibly interesting to maybe just go down the rabbit hole of avoidance a little bit and to understand that attachment, just because I don't think I've introduced my listeners enough to the topic of avoidant attachment. So why don't you just tell me, like, just bottom line, what is avoidant attachment and what shapes as you said, from 0 to 3, that's when your attachment is formed. So what has likely happened to a child that developed an avoidant attachment?
Yeah. So there's actually two types of avoidance. There's a fearful avoidant, which is also known as disorganized attachment, or there's dismissive avoidant. And they're two very different things. And it comes down to, like you said, that birth to 3 years old. I actually was a fearful avoidant. But I lean heavily anxious in relationships because I was usually attracting dismissive avoidance. So the fearful avoidant has a lot of trauma as a kid. Maybe they have one parent who's completely emotionally checked out, or heavily dismissive avoidant, narcissistic, something like that. And so they're always on edge. They're always it is a lot of that anxiousness, but then there is a trauma that has been introduced to the anxious. Okay. So a lot of me growing up, there was a lot of death in my family, a lot of accidents, just different things like that. And so there was a lot of trauma there to my caregivers. My grandmother, I spent every single day with my grandmother pretty much from 6 weeks old till I was 4. And then she died unexpectedly of a heart attack. And so she was only 46 years old. And so that right there created a lot of, like, that was the fearful avoidant in me. A dismissive avoidant. So with fearful avoidance, you're going to have one parent or a caregiver of some sort that does attune to your emotions, just maybe not consistently. Okay. Whereas a dismissive avoidant, so I'll use my husband, for example. My ex-husband, he was dismissive avoidant because he didn't have parents growing up that were emotionally attuned to him at all. It was things like stop crying or I'm going to cry, or I'm going to give you something to cry about, or go to your room until you're good, quote unquote good. A 3-year-old doesn't know what good looks like, things like that, or throwing a fit because he was told no for something that he really wanted, and his parents would spank him instead of explaining to him, like, hey, it's okay to have big feelings, it's not okay to act like this. You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
there's just not a lot of really good parenting there. It's very dismissive parenting. I mean, that's what a dismissive avoidant, that's how they learn to be dismissive, is your emotions don't matter, so shut it down, figure it out, learn how to do it. 3-year-old kids can't actually regulate their emotions until on their own until they're between 7 to 10 years old. So they're anytime they're upset, like I have a 5-year-old right now, he has really big emotions, and a lot of times, like, he will lose his mind and then maybe need a hug, or maybe he's watching me to be like, is this as big of a deal as I think it is? And so if I'm like, it's okay, buddy, like, this is okay to feel this way, or, I understand why you feel this way. And also, one of the things that we say in our house is, you can be mad. You just can't be mad at that level, or you just can't be mad at that intensity. Meaning, you can be mad, but you can't hit your brother. You can't, if we're in the grocery store, you can't swipe the groceries off of the shelf, something like that. You can't scream so loud that you're hurting someone else. You want to scream into a pillow? Great. You want to scream into my chest or my arm if we're in a grocery store or a public place? That's fine. But we got to have some regulation. So we're teaching him those tools in real time. Whereas any insecure attachment, they weren't taught those tools. So they don't know, even as an adult, like, it's very difficult for them to regulate on their own or to regulate interdependently. They're either going to, as an anxious, they will be codependent and need someone else to regulate for them, or if they are a dismissive avoidant, they're going to regulate on their own. If they're fearful avoidant, this is what's wild about being a fearful avoidant, is that you can show anxious tendencies or dismissive avoidant tendencies in a 10-minute period. You run the entire gamut.
Right. I mean, this is so interesting to me on so many levels. And I think some of the things that are triggering my mind here is that I do believe that the description of which you're explaining when you're talking about what have happened or how they act, I definitely see people that I know and or have experienced being the counterpart of my own relationship,
Yeah.
typical with an anxious attachment. And what I have always found is that their own response to their own attachment style is that they're like, but nothing really bad happened. Like I had a good upbringing. My parents are fine. Like I'm not mad at my parents. Like I don't have any of these like
Yep.
negative
Yep.
emotions towards them. And I can see that it's true because I've seen them interact with each and
Yeah.
every one of those individuals. And I think what I always want to arrive at, or what I was annoyed at never arriving at, is that how do we help an avoidant recognize that a trauma doesn't necessarily have to have been this massive grand thing? Like it could be something as simple as divorce, right? Having divorced parents and it happening to them at a very young age, which happened to be the case in the situation that I'm thinking of. But they still might not have like a negative like feeling towards it, or thinking even that it was for the better or for XYZ reason, but still recognize that like although the way that you're viewing it isn't necessarily like a big trauma, doesn't mean it didn't affect you at a very young age, and it doesn't mean that you're not bleeding all over your relationship in the present moment as a result of what happened. How do you help people arrive at some sort of awareness there where they can actually change their wiring essentially to develop healthier relationships as adults? Because the individual that I'm thinking of just didn't want relationships ever, and but still wanted that intimacy so clear. It was so clear that they wanted someone, but could not give them essentially what it is that a partner need, which is like, especially in a woman that needs safety and predictability, they could not provide that. And yeah, do you catch my drift here?
Yeah, no, I'm catching everything you're putting down. So, okay, so here's the wild thing about this is that the only way to help them to become secure is for you to go first, for you to become secure first, and for you to show them that this is possible. Because, and that may mean as sad as it is, it may mean that you walk away and you love them from afar. And here's why, okay? 75% of the world. So if you're listening to this while you're driving, this is going to be hard to track, but I'm going to break it down for you as much as I can here. 75% of the world is insecure, meaning they're fearful avoidant, dismissive avoidant, or anxious. 25% of the world is secure. Okay? Out of that 75% of the insecure, 75% of men are an avoidant of some sort. 75% of women. Now, this is an old study. So, like, we're talking like 5 or 6 years old. So, it may have been updated, just so you know. Okay. So, 75% of women are anxious. Okay. 25% of women are avoidant. This is usually your really high achievers, your C-suite executives, your, like your CEOs of companies, your, people, women who are really, really high in the company who can just shut their emotions off completely. All right. 25% of men are anxious. Now, in order for a relationship to go, like for it to actually move forward, you have to have polarity in that relationship. So when you feel those butterflies when you first meet someone, guess what that is? That's your chemistry. That's your attachment style being like, look, magnet. And it's usually the opposite of what you have. And it is. It's like a magnet that's just like, it just sucks you to that other person. And then you don't want to leave. Okay. Now here's what happens with this. All right. Because this is why I tell you that 75% of men that are avoidant usually get left. And that's the only way to teach them. The reason is that women run on oxytocin. Okay. That's what helps us grow and change. Men run on dopamine. What is the opposite of dopamine? Vasopressin. The only way to make them change is the chemical that they feel when they are either A, in trouble, or B, when they have basically self-fulfilled the prophecy of abandonment, because that is their greatest fear. Don't leave me, but I'm also not going to do what it takes in order to keep you. You see what I'm saying? So what happens is when you leave them, you're triggering that vasopressin. When you stay with them and you're like, okay, Maybe you're fawning, you're people pleasing, you're like, okay, I'll do whatever, I'll sacrifice myself as an anxious to, yeah, it's that magnet, you're sucked to it. And so you're basically killing yourself so that they can live. When we leave that and we say, this is not working for me, I need input too. I need you to consider me as well. I need you to give as much as you take. And right now, I'm the only one giving, and you're just an extreme taker. When that happens and you leave, that's when it triggers of like, ah, crap, I think I did something wrong here. And that's if they want to, they will start to see it. But here's the problem. Going even further back than that, all right, so I'm breaking this down backwards to the way that you described it, but when they're seeing a divorce that happened at a very young age, they don't see what that happened emotionally. Okay. They also don't see what's happening. For example, we'll take a son and a mother. If that mother is emotionally negligent, if maybe we'll just say that there's a lot of ignorance in the family, they just don't know about emotions. So there's a lot of sarcasm, or there's like just a lot of avoidance in both of the parents. What's going to happen to that child is it looks completely normal the way that they were raised. So I have dismissive avoidance come to me constantly and say, I don't know what you're talking about. My childhood was great. Until I say, what about your emotional needs? And now it's like a deer in headlights. What do you mean by emotional needs? Well, were your emotional needs met? Well, no, I didn't know I had emotional needs. Everyone has emotional needs. A lot of times, so a lot of the men that I work with, I literally have to teach them what empathy looks like. I have to say, okay, tell me something that's stressful in your life right now. And then I say, wow, that seems really hard for you. Are you okay? Do you need a hug? And they get this weird look on their face, like they're feeling a texture for the first time that they've never felt before. And it's like, ooh, I like this, but like it also feels a little weird. And like, I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about this. And it's kind of gooey, but also like, what am I doing here? They don't know how to handle it. And I'll say, do you like it when I don't try to fix, when I just listen to you? And I say, yeah, that must have been really hard for you. And they're like, yeah, I really like it, but I don't know what to do with it. You don't know what to do with it because you've never had it happen before to you. And you don't offer it to anybody else because you don't know what it is. That's empathy. And then it's like a light bulb turns on and they're like, oh my God, I feel like I'm waking up for the first time in 30 years out of a coma.
Yeah.
And then they start to realize how much else in our relationship have I not been providing because I didn't even know what it was. And this is the thing, that as anxious, we have these great and wonderful expectations of what our relationship is going to be because that's how they were in the first 4 months of our relationship.
Yeah.
They set that expectation, but it wasn't sustainable. So it's not like they don't know how they're supposed to be. They just don't have the capacity to be able to keep it going. And that's where things start to shift because then we get attached to, well, you used to be like this and now you're not. So instead of looking at the reality of now, we focus on and cling to that potential of what they had in the beginning. And that's what also keeps us stuck.
I mean, it is so spot on to my own experience of this situation. It's obviously been years now, so I don't carry any anger or resentment over the situation anymore. I'm also I've been in several, well, in two relationships since then, and I'm in a happy relationship now. But all of that to say is like, what I remember when I was in it, we had hit the like 3 month threshold when it's natural to start thinking about like next steps of the relationship, and everything was going in that direction. There was nothing to suggest at that stage that's not where we were headed. And to me, I remember being in this incredible shock when they said that they just didn't, they even used the words, I am anti-committal. I don't want to have a girlfriend because then your problem becomes my problems. And
Yep.
and I was in complete denial. I could not understand how we had arrived at this point because everything had been so great and so blissful up until this point. Just to like make a long story short here, we ended up being in this push and pull of like, but then we broke up, but then we get back together. And then we would always get a little bit closer to what I wanted to arrive at, which was like a long-term commitment. Whereas like after like the biggest breakup with that we had, where we had been apart for a longer time, after that, we'd become a committed couple and we'd meet each other's parents,
Mhm.
and it was like this bigger threshold of things. But I remember like providing a list where it's like, I'm eventually going to want to get married and have a family. And I remember
Yeah.
them telling me directly that I cannot tell you with certainty that I can give you everything on that list, but never say never, which kept me going, kept the hope alive. And granted that I had my own anxious attachment, which was the biggest pain for me, was just at the end of it was like, why can't I leave? Like, why can't I
Yeah.
get out of this? The intoxication of staying in it for so long, like looking back now, I'm like, how? Like, why? But I have had to go through that. And to your point of saying that you actually do have to leave in order for them to arrive at that point, I don't really know the nature of their relationships today, but I do know that they're in a committed relationship with someone that I think is great. I know her a little bit myself when we've talked, and she's genuinely amazing. And I really hope that she has a different experience than what I had, which I told her. And but the point is that like I remember being so angry back then when we were going through the breakup, where I was like, I swear he's gonna become secure for someone else to love. Like that used to be such like a pain point for me.
Maybe, but maybe not too. The thing is that a secure typically isn't attracted to an insecure, but it can happen. If you're in a relationship and you become secure while in that relationship, you can only get to about 80% secure outside of a relationship, because the relationship is what triggers all of those insecurities in you. And that's when you start looking at it to be like, oh, still need to work on that. Oh, still need to work
Right,
on that,
right.
right? So the thing is that when you're in a relationship and you become secure, you can still make it work with an avoidant. Is it going to be blissful and everything that you want it to be? Probably not. But I mean, you're going to have a relationship that's about 70% because of you, because you're the one that instead of, so like anxious will have these great expectations for their avoidant, right? And that's what creates this push pull dynamic, is that you're always pursuing as the anxious while they're always pulling away. And then they realize they messed up because you start pulling away. Now there's space for them to actually come back. So that's what they will actually take that, and they will start coming back towards you because, oh, no, 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 don't leave me. Don't leave me. So they will come back towards you when you start pulling away. But it's like, if you're listening to this, I've got my hands up and they're parallel. And the anxious, so I'm like moving one hand towards the other. The anxious is always leaning towards the avoidant, while the avoidant is leaning away, right? But the anxious never moves. So when the avoidant does start to come back, they've only got so far to go, right? So what happens with that is the anxious has to go first. And this is how they change. This is what actually tells an avoidant, hey, it's safe to change. The thing with an avoidant, with a dismissive avoidant, what they don't realize is they need connection, but they've gone their entire life surviving on their own, depending only on themselves. So they're constantly looking for emotions. They're looking for connection. They're looking for emotional intimacy. This is why they can sleep around and have hundreds of sexual partners, but it's never fulfilling for them because they get into this relationship. And then when they're finally truly loved, they're loved only for who they are. They don't have to work for that. They don't have to earn it. There's no conditions attached. And they don't know what that feels like because they've literally never had that before.
Yeah.
So it's really difficult for them. And that's why it feels engulfing. That's one of their core fears, is being engulfed in a relationship, because they don't know what that looks like. They don't know what love really looks like. But at the heart of all of the insecurities is, are you going to leave me?
And the
And
irony
sometimes,
is that I had to.
yeah,
I was completely like at the end of that, I loaded myself because
Yeah.
not because he was bad and not because I was bad, but because I clearly knew what I wanted and he had communicated clearly that I wasn't going to get it. And I wasn't able to walk out of it until at some point I just had to cut it, just completely cut it off. And it
Yeah.
took months before we were even in conversation again. But by that time, I had, yeah, I moved on. It was certainly a very long process in terms of like, while you're in it, you already know you got to get out, but you just don't know really
Yeah.
how to do it.
Yeah.
And I, like, in retrospect, in learning about anxious attachment and learning about the difference between men and women, and just more like the last year, really, like, I've gone this like roller coaster of, do I loathe this person too now? Am I upset with this person? Am I so mad at them? And also being like, but I really don't care. I'm so happy with where I'm at. I wouldn't have had it any other way. But there's still like some sort of resentment there, which I'm sure goes both ways. But I'm like, it definitely came to me as some sort of like, oh, did I fail? Did I fail? But at the same time, what I'm hearing you say when you're explaining like the parallels and how the anxious lean in, like that is 100% what happened. But it wasn't until like every time what you're telling me here is true, because every time I walk back, he would always come back, but it was the pull away, and we needed that space in order to arrive at a point where it was like recognized that there was a gap here. But then it was so hard for me to then be like, but why do you always do that then? Why do you always come back but simultaneously don't want the commitment? It's just not, the math is not mathing. And that was so incredibly confusing to me at the time, I remember. And almost like the bad news to any woman who find themselves relating to the description in which we are sharing right now, the bad news is that you're going to have to pull away in order to get what you want. And chances are you're probably only going to arrive at that in a different relationship. And that's not to say that it's like, that's even like the good news almost. Not that it's a new relationship, but that you'll get what you want. But if there is someone who is dismissive avoidant and want to keep their partner and want to be more empathetic and want to actually give them what they need, how do you suggest that they go about handling their trauma? And maybe even firstly starting with acknowledging that there is a trauma.
Okay, so addressing this, but also addressing where you said that if you're an anxious and you're with a dismissive avoidant and you have to leave because you know that you're never going to get what you want, both of you have to do the work. You have to look at that. Every single person in this world has trauma, whether it's big T, little t trauma, it doesn't matter. Every single person, if you notice that you have unhealthy habits or patterns in your relationship, if you've had multiple different partners or the same partner telling you something multiple different times, you need to stop and you need to like set aside your pride, tie your ego to a stake and burn it, and actually listen to what they're saying, because they're seeing something in you that you don't see yourself. So what that, and it's human nature to believe that we're doing better than what we really are, right? So that's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
But the thing is that if you're being told this, or if you're recognizing these patterns, the only way, you can't just leave a relationship and be like, it's fine, somebody else down the road will be better. No, you're going to end up attracting, because remember what we said, your chemistry is attracting their chemistry, and it's going to be polar opposites. So when that happens, you're going to be attracting the exact same person that you just left with a different head.
Yeah.
They're going to have the exact same. And then you're sitting here like what you've been talking about, being like, why am I attracting this? Like, what is happening? Yeah, you are. So the only way to fix this is to get help and to work with somebody like me that's been doing this for several years, that have done it themselves, that have gone through all of this, and to actually do the work on yourself and look and say, what did I learn? What is the conditioning that I learned from my dad? What is the conditioning that I learned from my mom? What is the conditioning that I learned of how they treated each other, of how they treated me and my siblings, if there are some, of the way that they interact with the world, of the filters that they have, of the thoughts of, I'm never going to be good enough, or money's really hard to make, or there's never enough time, energy, love, money, space, whatever. All of the different conditionings that you have to overcome those, and you have to learn something different. Because if you don't, you're just taking those into every single relationship and then wondering why the relationship's not working out. Well, you're the common denominator. So
Right.
you have to fix it.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. I mean, what I was thinking about too when I was learning about anxious attachment, and because I needed to learn about anxious attachment in order to accomplish what I wanted. And I mean, the sole reason of me creating the podcast, Becoming Secure with Magsmindset, was because I needed an accountability partner to help
Yeah.
me stay on top of what it is that I wanted to accomplish, because I knew so well that I wanted to be a wife. And I
Yeah.
even remember thinking in that relationship, because they didn't want children, that I was like, I guess I don't need that, you know? And today I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I almost like, yeah. But think like
Yeah.
at the same time, like, oh, there's so many things that we're willing to give up when we're in love with someone and we really just want it to work, you know? And I definitely fell into that trap on my own. And what I've realized too is that the things that I was annoyed with in him and the things that was just building resentment in him, I recognized the more I understood about anxious attachment too, is that he was just holding up a mirror. We're just looking at like these things within ourselves. And I recognize that like even in my relationship today, like I still have triggers. I still have certain fears. I still like, it's not like just because I'll have more awareness, I'm not afraid of the relationship ending, but it's not like it's just not so all consuming, because what's been consistently true about my current relationship is that I felt safe from the get-go. And I
Mhm.
still feel safe today because there was never like a 3-month threshold where we're like discussing and now we're going backwards again. It was always just going in one direction. And that
And
made me
that's what's healthy.
safe. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what's healthy.
Yeah. So when people are finding themselves at this threshold where it's natural to move forward, and I think deep down they want to move forward too, what is it that's stopping them? And how can they identify when they are at that point, like, okay, this is that point where I'm at, instead of repeating the pattern, here's what I can do instead? What would that look like?
Listening to your partner's words, and actually, are their words and their actions matching up? And if they say one thing, but they are doing something else, or if they're doing something and they're saying something else, you have to look at that for what it is, that it's an inconsistency in reality. So, what is the reality? Like in your case, for example, where he's saying, well, I don't think I want kids. And you're like, okay, I can give that up. That's where resentment is built. What people don't realize is that resentment is not because of the other person. Resentment that you have is because of bricks that you laid, because you had an expectation and that expectation was probably unspoken and then it wasn't met. So now you're judging them for not meeting an expectation that you either didn't vocalize or they didn't have the capacity to do. So let's take this for example, okay? If you would have said, oh, it's fine, I don't need children to move on, eventually there would have come a day where maybe the doctor says, you're too old to have children. Or you've seen other moms that have children. You're married now and you see other moms that have babies. And then that ache starts to come into you and you're like, I really did want kids actually. That resentment that you feel is not for him, it's for yourself,
It's true. Yeah.
because you said no when you really meant yes. But it starts with self awareness. We're so eager to give things up, but we don't even know in our true selves what's true for us.
Yeah.
Do we really want kids or do we not?
Yeah.
Do we really need physical touch? Or are we just vying for that because we didn't get it as a child? Do we really need quality time? Like, I don't teach love languages. I hate love languages because it makes people, I'm serious. I really truly feel, I just did a reel on this morning on Instagram because I really feel like it just causes friction between couples because the goalpost is always moving. So, in different stages of your life, you can have different love languages. So,
Right.
like right now, mine might be words of affirmation, but 6 months from now, depending on what happens, it might be more so physical touch. If I'm asking right now for my partner to learn Dutch, and then in 6 months, I'm learning, oh, no, 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 stop learning Dutch, and now you need to learn Japanese. What? they don't speak either of those languages because that's not their love language. Their
Right.
love language is words as physical as acts of service,
Right.
which is like learning Arabic. You see what I'm saying? So like
Yeah. No, I
you're
see.
always trying to learn something different. So instead, here's the thing that people don't realize is that when you do the work and you truly become secure and you've gone through and you've gotten over all of your traumas and all of that, you actually become a lot less emotionally needy. You just it's just this, like you said, it's just a safety where you're like, you're gonna love me how you love me. I'm gonna love you how I love you. And that's gonna be good enough for both of us because we know that no matter what, even if the relationship does end, I've got me. And I'm okay no matter what happens. And I'm still loved because I love myself.
Yes, I think that is a very crucial point to arrive at because I definitely did not have that self-love that I wanted someone else to provide, essentially. Because you were talking about it introductory that you, as a anxious, you are codependent and you need someone else to regulate you, and that was 100% true for me. And there's just certain things that you said there where it's like a part of me wants to be self-aware and recognize where that is 100% true, and then there's also one part of me that wants to get defensive and explain that, okay, yes, but. So let's get into that. One of the
Mhm.
things is that I do believe that I was able to communicate the things that I wanted, but I definitely shrank myself more and more. And but definitely, what did end up like what wound up happening over time is that when you're constantly met with, when you want to have an uncomfortable conversation where you're sharing vulnerable things about what it is that you truly want, first of all, there's going to be generational things too. Whereas, like my parents' generations, for instance, they were a part of a group that of women in particular that was to seen and not be heard, meaning that you're
Mhm.
to look good and be pretty and do well, but you're not to have your opinions heard or even taken into consideration, right? So there is this element of like it's hard to ask for what you want because you don't want to be too much. The too much was very predominant in my relationship. Being needy, I heard how needy I was all the time and clingy and stuff like that, and it would like be like this reaction, like they really did
Mhm.
not like, I repelled them almost, right? So
Mhm.
then it's also hard to come and approach a hard topic when all you really want is to connect and to understand each other better and
Mhm.
to arrive at a place of closeness and security, right? When you're then met with like the eye roll or like, this is exactly why I don't have a girlfriend, now your problems become my problems. Like it becomes increasingly hard to ask for what you want when it's not a safe environment to ask. And of course, I recognize that it is what you said introductory. They haven't learned to hold a conversation like that. They haven't been necessarily exposed to that degree to uncomfortable conversations. So instead of being open and to not take it as an attack or take it personally, they don't know how to hold the space for it, and it just like they need to get rid of it somehow, so it becomes this bodily reaction where it's not actually a reaction to me, it's their response to not being able to hold a conversation, essentially. At least that's how I the logic I created in my mind, I suppose. But like I said, when it comes to in my relationships now, well, in my relationship now, where I do have that self-love, I have that self-compassion, I can arrive at, if there's we're also in a long distance relationship with a time zone difference, so I might not get the response that I need right away or whatever. And depending on where I'm at in my cycle too, I can be completely dramatic about something I'm not even going to give a shit about in the next week. So
Yeah.
but having that self-love and having that self-compassion and also that self-awareness to recognize that pattern too, I think what I finally arrived at in later relationships was that I can now regulate myself and they don't need to be the ones regulating me. But that took a long time, and it did take having to actually get through that entire breakup to survive that breakup and to be at the other end of like, oh wow, I was actually able to get out of the thing that I thought that I was never going to get out of. And I actually will accomplish what I wanted all along as a result of it. And yeah, it is such a rewarding journey at the end of the day, although it's probably the most painful thing that I've had to go through. So I don't even know if that is any words of encouragement for anyone in a similar situation. Maybe you have some greater words of wisdom of how to embark on that journey for both sides of the spectrum that is more encouraging.
I think, oh man, there's just so many things to break down in everything that you said there. But I think what people really need to understand is that we're all from birth, we are all looking for connection. Babies will literally die if they don't have connection when they are first born. And so we're looking for that constantly. The thing is that you can't be connected and loved unless you are known. And you can't be known unless you're vulnerable. So what happens is when you are in a relationship, and dismissive avoidants are great at this, if they're sending a text, it's called a bid for connection. And this is what Dr. John Gottman and his wife Julie talk about a lot. You can bid for someone's connection over 100 times over a dinner. So it's a look that you give them that says, I like you. It's a look that you give them that says, hey, let's get out of here. Like I'm done with these people, right? It's a touch on the arm. It's a text that you send throughout the day. Hey, how's your day? Something like that. Now, here's how this plays out with dismissive avoidants and anxious attachers, okay? So if a dismissive avoidant sends you a text, and maybe it's a meme, maybe it's a reel, maybe it's something like that, there's no context to it, right? But what you gather from that is, I miss you. They're not actually being vulnerable in that. They're sending you the reel as, hey, I'm thinking about you. But now they're requiring you to be vulnerable and say, I miss you too. So there's no like that exchange there. They're still closing themselves off. They're still holding themselves at arm's length, and they're requiring you to come to them. So it's not a 50-50. It's a I'll go 10, but I need you to come 90. Okay, so that's not an equal exchange there. Your cycle, for example. If your cycle, and for women, what we don't realize is our cycle really, like when you sync your life to your cycle, man, does your life get so much better. But again, that's one of those things of like, men don't understand what that's like. So it's like, you're fine. It's not that big of a deal. My mom did it, so you can do it too. That's not necessarily the case. So I remember one time we were in Egypt. My husband, all of his family is from Egypt. We were there and I was having the worst cramping. My back hurt horribly. It was awful. I had been horribly sick 3 or 4 days before that. And my husband got so mad at me and was like, we have things planned today. You need to get out of bed and you need to, like, let's go. And his mother, who does not even speak English, knew by the tone of his voice what he was saying to me. And she jumped in the middle of him. And this is like, she is the sweetest 5'2", like barely weighs 110 pounds kind of woman. And she jumped in the middle of him and was like, I have not raised you like this. This is not how this goes. Like, she is a woman and she is going through things that you will never understand. Get her a hot water bottle and shut your mouth, basically. And it's like, if she doesn't want to go, she does not have to. And I will forever be grateful for that woman. But that's the thing, is that men just don't get it. So it's our job to communicate that, because again, that goes back to those resentments and those uncommunicated expectations. So we have to explain to them, like for us, we have a calendar, just a paper calendar, that this week is green. That means I'm ovulating. This week is yellow. That means it's the week before my period. You might proceed with caution. This week is red. Do not approach. Do not talk to me. Do not, no. Bring, like, give
No
me
jokes.
hugs and cuddles.
No jokes.
And, yeah. No jokes, and don't chew your food raw. That's it. But like when you've also done the work, that also gets better. So you don't have as many premenstrual symptoms. You don't have as many negative feelings that come up as what you do because all of those get worse with the body chemistry, because that's what emotions are. Emotions are just chemistry. So you've got attachment wounds that are chemistry, emotions that are chemistry, your bodily chemistry of going through your cycle and your hormones and all of that. When you learn to regulate that chemistry, regulating the emotions and the feelings is a little bit easier.
Yeah, it's so interesting to talk about this, especially after the fact, because I'm not so I'm not like emotionally involved with it as I used to be.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's distance. It's easier to like see myself and where I fell short, because of course when I'm looking back at it, like I didn't address what I wanted at the end of it because I was so afraid of saying the wrong thing or being too needy or
Mhm.
wanting too much. So it was so much easier to just shrink and to become small.
Yeah.
But the result of that was just, like I said, I self-loaded at the end of it because I knew I wanted more and somehow like I couldn't, you know? So yeah, it is really interesting to see the before and the after of that and to recognize where, of course, I'm responsible for how, like it takes two to tango, right? So of course I contributed to why it didn't work out the way that I wanted it to. And I think that is probably the harshest truth that I've had to acknowledge to myself too, because like you said, we often fall too short in looking at what did we contribute. Yeah, like we often think that we're further ahead than we are. And I also hear it in friends and how they're talking about their relationships. And it's like it's very often on the other, right? Like it's very often them that are the problem. It's never themselves, right? So I think it's something to be said there about like having self-awareness in these things. So maybe to help people recognize their patterns a little bit more, like what are the subtle signs that might not be so visible to help people recognize that like you are in a dynamic that might not be what you want it to be, and here's how that you either save it within the relationship or have to break out of it and not make it this like grand thing that seems this impossible task that is the most painful thing ever, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I call it the loop of doom. So anytime you are having a negative experience, a negative feeling, dig into that. Why do you have that? How are you making it about yourself? How are you making it about your partner? Okay. The loop of doom is just this. If an anxious attacher is going to their partner, usually they're going for connection. But the way that it comes out, and this one, my best tip for you is to record yourself. Pull out your phone, hit record video, not just audio, okay? Because you want to be able to see yourself. Number one, if you feel like you're changing your tone, changing your behavior because the video recorder's on, that's a red flag, okay? When you are going to your partner, if you are an anxious attacher, typically, if you're looking for connection, you're going to do it in one of four ways: blame, shame, criticizing, or getting emotionally big. Okay. You'll go and or questioning. Okay. So you're asking a lot of questions. So if you imagine an infinity symbol, if you will, so that's the top of the right hand side of the infinity symbol. It goes down to the left side of the infinity symbol for the avoidant. When you go to them and you're blaming, shaming, questioning, criticizing, or getting emotionally big, that instills the narrative in their head of, here we go again. Nothing I do is ever good enough. And it's the same thing. Every single person I've ever worked with, it's the same thoughts. Nothing I do is ever good enough. I'm not appreciated. I'm not respected. Like she's crazy, something like that. Okay. It invokes sadness and anger in them. Okay. So for men, a lot of times what happens is it will come out as anger because that's the only acceptable emotion by societal standards that they have, but it's actually not anger. It's fear, sadness, guilt, embarrassment, or resentment.
Mm.
Okay. So that's what they start feeling. What do? Numb out. They avoid drugs, alcohol, their phone, porn, the TV, golf, whatever hobby they have, friends, things like that. Now that's going up the top of the infinity symbol on the left, back down to the right for the anxious. So when he starts to numb out, and I'm using heteronormative language of what we talked about earlier with the 75%, what that invokes with her is, I can't trust him. It's never going to change. I'm always going to feel this way. I'm not loved. I'm not wanted. I'm not chosen. What it invokes in her is anger, sadness, and loneliness.
Yeah.
So he's not lonely in that. He may feel alone, but he uses friends to cope, right? Excuse me. For her, She starts to feel the same emotions. You guys are feeling the same emotions. You're both having negative narratives about each other. You're going about it different ways. So when you get help, when you learn why you do these things and you learn tools from someone like me that teaches you, okay, instead of doing this, do this.
Yeah.
Instead of going and saying, why do you always? Why didn't you? Why do you never? Things like that. Say, hey, is now a good time to talk about something I've been noticing in myself? Yep. Give me 5 minutes until after this, blah, blah, blah. After I'm done with this email, after this show's over, whatever. Then you go and you say, you keep it all about yourself. Instead of saying, I've noticed that you don't, and you do, and you say, and you blah, blah, blah. You say, I've noticed that I feel alone when I'm not with you. I've noticed that I miss you. I've noticed that I would love to have more connection. Do you think that we can come up with a way to figure that out? How to make that happen?
Mhm.
You see the communication difference? Instead of, you're always on your phone. You're always on your phone is actually the bid for connection of, I miss you. Can
Yeah.
we please have some one-on-one interaction here?
Can I get the attention?
Yeah. But the attacking of, you're always on your phone, it's like the gate to communication is closed and now there's a wall up.
Yeah.
So it's just different. So it's learning how to communicate. It's learning how to ask for what you really want without coming across emotionally big or dismissive.
Yeah. This is so valuable, all of it, in so many different ways. And I've found this to be true as well, because I remember where I had to catch myself when dating again was when my boyfriend asked me what I wanted. I remember having to, like, it was a particular situation, like a Christmas gift or something. And it was like, what do you want for Christmas? And that was pretty shortly after we started dating. And I was like, you don't have to give me anything. That's fine. Like, you came all the way
Mhm.
here to see me, like, play it small, not being too needy, like, and then I
Yeah.
immediately caught myself. And then I was like, you know what? I'm doing that thing right now where I am afraid that if I say what I really want, you're going to think I'm too much and you're not going to want to
Yeah.
be with me anymore. And I straight
Yeah.
up said it like that. And then I was like, so the truth is, I want jewelry.
It's huge though. That's huge that you noticed that and that you brought it to his attention that way. Like, that's great.
Thank you. I mean, that's very validating. I mean, yes, I had to learn this in many ways. And there was also another conversation we had quite recently where he's like, why do you have to stir around the pot to arrive at the point? Just say what you want. And I just want to know what you want. And of course, there's something nice to just hear someone wanting to give you what you want. Of course, that's incredibly validating in itself. But I had to go rounds with myself of like, why is it so hard to ask for what you want? And I was explaining that to him too, that like, my experience with asking for what I want hasn't been the most pleasant and it makes me
Yeah.
scared. But of course, like I've also come to this place that I know that I can do Maggie, like I will survive. So if I ask for what I want and that is too much, then I am in the wrong relationship anyways, like, but that
Mhm.
was like,
Yeah.
it was really hard to look yourself in the mirror because the hardest thing about becoming secure isn't acknowledging your anxious attachment or learning about and avoiding. It is acting differently in the heat of the moment. It is
Yeah.
checking yourself as you're being triggered. I have had to come back to repair. Like I've had to become very good at repairing because I'm not always really good in the moment. And fortunately, my boyfriend is incredibly gracious in that, and it helps that we knew each other from before and had been roommates and lived together and we're friends. So it helps that we've had that foundation built already, but it allowed me to ask more. But it was to becoming secure has essentially been for me arriving at a place where if I have to leave a relationship because it's for the greater good for the both of us, which was actually easier in a relationship with a friend because I wanted him to get what he wanted. So in the beginning, when we were stepping over the threshold from friendship to dating, it became this thing of let's identify right now if we can actually give each other what it is that we want because we
Mhm.
want the other person to have it. So it was
Mhm.
it was a safer place to date in, of course. And that was, yeah. And I don't know, I'm rambling a little bit, but that being said,
It's okay. I got three things. I've got three things that I really want to point out what you just
yes.
said
Yeah.
that are really important for your listeners to grasp onto, okay?
All right, go.
Repair is not a secure thing. Repair is a necessity to having a great relationship. It does not matter if you have an argument every single day of your relationship, okay? If you repair well. So if you come back and you just say, sorry, that's not a repair. That's what you learned when you were 3 years old. That doesn't work as an adult anymore, okay? I'm sorry. 4, I know it impacted you in this way. Here's what I'm going to do in the future to fix it. And will you forgive me? That is a proper repair. Okay. Right. And it doesn't have to take a long time. I'm sorry that I was late for dinner. I know that you worked all day on that. And I know that really upset you and wasted your time. In the future, I am going to text you if I'm going to be late by more than 5 minutes. Will you forgive me? That took what, 17 seconds? It does not have to be this like huge drawn out long thing, but it does need to include all 5 things. Number 2, your boyfriend coming to you with curiosity. Hey, why do you do this? Because I noticed that this is a pattern. That is a healthy relationship. When you can come at things with curiosity and always trying to be knowing your partner, that is what leads to love. That is you saying, hey, I want to know you better. I like you. I want to know how you operate and why you operate the way you do. Instead of, hey, I'm going to judge you for doing this the way that you do it because you don't do it like me. Yeah. How self-righteous are you that you feel like I have to do everything that you do? Right? It's arrogance. And the third thing is, and this is what a relationship, every single relationship comes down to this. The success and the failure of every single relationship comes down to friendship. Do you consider your partner like you consider your best friend? Do you speak to them like your best friend? Do you treat them like your best friend? If you're in a store and you're like, oh, my best friend would love this, do you do the same for your partner? Oh, my partner would love this. Not because it's a holiday, but just because you're seeing something that they would love and it reminds you of them, and so you get it for them. Are you treating them like a friend? Do you care like you do your best friend? Yeah. Do you do activities together like you are best friends? That is what makes a successful long-term relationship. Right there is friendship. How strong is your friendship?
I mean, you're stroking my ego in all the right ways right now, Kameran. It's really nice. Of course, I don't have any insecurities about this relationship, which is incredibly nice, of course, especially it's so funny because I had no idea this is the direction in which this conversation was going to go. I just feel inclined to also just, because I really don't mean when I am having these conversations and we're talking about this, of course, I'm talking about my experience of this, and there's a counterpart in this equation that doesn't get to be defended or say their piece, you know. And I just want to emphasize that, like, as much as there was a lot of pain in that relationship, there was also so much joy, and I genuinely believe that person deserves so much love, so much joy, so much happiness, just because, I mean, the reason why we get so attached to begin with is because the highs are so high, and of course they're incredible people. And learning to love ourselves and learning to love others in an anxious avoidant dynamic, it isn't easy, but it doesn't mean that it is impossible. So I really do hope that those are some words of encouragement of those who find themselves in that situation. And if they feel guilty for loving someone that it is hard to love, or including themselves, because sometimes it's really hard to love yourself, you know, and that has been true for me as well. And yeah, I wouldn't want to be without that situation, because like what you're saying right now, I am in a relationship that feels so incredibly safe, and it doesn't make me doubt in any ways. And it doesn't, I think what I love about it the most is the way that my creativity comes out, the way I feel as though I do more of what I love instead of ruminating on the things that I don't understand. It is a space for me to be myself authentically as I am, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. So for anyone who is in a situation that is incredibly hard and it is incredibly painful, and you're losing yourself in both sides of that, and it's just a season of life in which you are learning to get to know yourself better at your hardest, like at the hardest stage, essentially. It is incredibly vulnerable. But I mean, love is the greatest thing of all. So doing all of that for the sheer reason of loving more is never going to be the wrong decision to make. Going down that rabbit hole of understanding yourself and being curious and recognizing your attachment and where it's coming from, it is for the greater good. I mean, it's so clear that you have so much knowledge on the topic of attachment styles and all of which that goes into attachment theory and also all the difference of them too and how they're all interconnected. I mean, just in this conversation alone, like I said, we didn't really know in what direction the conversation was going to steer, but I feel like I've unraveled so many things to just readdress things that I haven't really been thinking about or have actually been thinking about, but haven't necessarily talked to someone about. So it is really helpful to talk to someone with this much experience. And it's so clear to me that you would be such a good coach to someone who find themselves really needing it. And like you've said several times throughout this episode too, is that like you will need someone to help you in your relationship sometimes. It's just human nature and we're stronger together. And some people have more experience than others. And some people have the bandwidth and the capacity to be that voice of reason that you need sometimes when you're struggling in your commitment. So thank you so much for being here, Kameran. I've had such a good time chatting with you today, and I feel richer because of this conversation. And I truly, truly hope that this is impacting other people too who can find themselves in similar situations. And please let everyone know where they can reach you if they want to engage in a conversation with you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. This has been so fun. People can find me on Instagram at married.and.connected. I have a podcast that goes out every Monday called Married and Connected. Pretty much anywhere, if you just search Married and Connected, I will come up.
Yeah.
But except for my website. My website was created 8 years ago when I wasn't really thinking about things like spelling or, things like that. So my website is actually www.recognizingpotential.com. So yeah, that's
Gotcha.
where you can.
Thank you so much for being on my podcast, Cameron. I'm so happy that you've been here. And yeah, I hope people reach out to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I hope they do too.